Welcome everyone to this Adult Education Senior University session, Managing Money, a Caregiver's Guide to Finances. And our presentation today is led by Debbie Woodroof. And Debbie is going to take it over here in just a second. And she's an Alzheimer's Association Awareness Champion. Thank you so much for being here, Debbie.
Thank you for having me. I would like to welcome everyone to Managing Money, a Caregiver's Guide to Finances. This is an Alzheimer's Association education program that can be presented either in person or, as we're doing today, on Zoom. My role with the chapter, I kind of wear a variety of hats. Today on my t-shirt, I have the fact that listed first, I'm an awareness champion. And that means that I meet with groups of individuals and talk about just general Alzheimer's information and statistics and some warning signs and some tips. June is actually Healthy Brain Awareness Month. And so I've been doing a lot of presentations and talking a lot about what's healthy for the brain, the same things that are healthy for the heart. So I would encourage you to keep those things in mind. Another hat that I wear is I'm an advocate. And so what that means is I advocate with our elected officials, both at the state level and at the federal level. I recently had the opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. to be on Capitol Hill and be an advocate, meet with our senators and our representatives from the state of Indiana, and talk with them about what's important as far as legislation that's either in committee or in the process of being voted on or discussed in either Senate or the House of Representatives. And my third hat that I wear is I am a co-facilitator for about the past 10 years with the support group that I started out with when my mother was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's in right around 2011. I became a member of that group in 2014. Unfortunately, my mother did pass in 2017 in June. And so most recently, her youngest sister passed away. Unfortunately, ironically, I don't know what adjective to use, but they passed away. They both passed away 6 years apart on June the 2nd. So it's a bit of heredity in my mother's side of the family. So I advocate and I'm passionate about hopefully finding a cure within my lifetime. So that's enough about me. Let's talk about the program itself. This program is designed to provide for people who care or provide care for someone living with Alzheimer's or another dementia, or any chronic illness for that matter. Throughout today's program, you'll see videos of dementia care experts as well as real caregivers. We'll also go through a number of activities that will help you create a financial plan. In today's program, you'll see and hear some general information on legal, financial, and medical issues. It's important to note that this information is not meant to take the place of professional advice. Laws are different in every state and are constantly changing. If you have a specific legal, financial, or medical question, you should talk with the professional before acting on any of that information in today's program. Before we get started with any of our actual information, I would like to take this time to acknowledge and thank those organizations for participating in the steering committee that assisted in developing today's program. Steering committee members offered their expertise before, during, and after program creation, reviewing materials and collateral to ensure accuracy and inclusivity. We appreciate their valuable input. And as you can see, it was quite a group that helped us with this program. By the end of today's programs, our learning objectives objectives are that you'll be able to describe how caregiving affects finances, list the legal and financial documents caregivers should put in place, prepare for useful discussions about financial decisions and planning, identify steps to lower the chances of financial abuse and fraud, and begin to create a backup plan in case you can no longer provide care. In this program, you'll hear a few key words and phrases. The word caregiver describes a family member, friend, or legal guardian who supports someone with their health needs and well-being. Caregiving often includes assistance with activities of daily living like bathing and dressing, as well as activities like paying bills, shopping, and managing money. Some of you may also hear or prefer the term care partner, which is often used to describe someone who's supporting a person living with Alzheimer's in the early stage of the disease, when the person might still be able to do most daily activities with little or no help. For example, they may be able to pay their own bills or take care of money, but they can still benefit from the help of family and friends. The word finances refers to money and things that are worth money. This could include household cash flow, bank accounts, credit cards, loans, insurance policies, or retirement plans. Financial literacy means understanding how to manage money, such as handling day-to-day expenses and how to plan for the future. It is the ability to make informed and effective decisions about money. So our first module is going to cover the costs of caregiving. Our financial decisions and actions can have a significant impact on our lives, both now and in the future. Financial literacy is especially important for caregivers, no matter which illness the person they care for is living with, because it provides them the knowledge and skills needed to better support themselves and others. Let's see what you know about the costs of caregiving. So, what percentage of caregivers do you think have out-of-pocket costs as a result of caregiving? Since we're not going to use a answer panel on the Zoom, or we're not going to have the folks that are in the room hold up their hand to say what they're voting on, you can just for yourself consider 47% of caregivers have out-of-pocket costs, 67, 78, 95. And the answer is 78%. According to an AARP report, more than 3/4 of caregivers have out-of-pocket costs as a result of caregiving. This includes household expenses like mortgage payments and home modifications, as well as medical expenses like co-payments, medical equipment, and travel to doctor's appointments. Caregiving can impact finances in a number of ways. Because of the intense amount of time people spend providing caregiving, it may affect the person's employment. Many caregivers end up cutting their hours, taking time off, retiring early, or even quitting their jobs. These decisions can mean lost income, more debt, difficulty saving for retirement, or cutting back on other costs. Many people don't realize how expensive it can be to take care of others. Let's hear a real life example.
So some of the sacrifices I've had to make financially due to having to care for my mom were things like paying for some of her care, doctor visits in some cases, clothing, to try to limit the spend down of her money. So I supplemented where I could and then retired early, which impacted my income to continue to care for her, and then looking into getting a part-time job to supplement her memory care facility care.
Caregiving and managing financial challenges can also have a major impact on the caregiver's own health. due to high levels of burden, exhaustion, and uncertainty and stress. Caregivers may put off taking care of their own needs by skipping medical appointments, not getting enough sleep, or ignoring symptoms of physical and mental health conditions. When caregivers don't take care of themselves, their own health can get worse, leading to additional medical expenses. Every illness brings different medical, emotional, and financial challenges for the caregiver, but caring for a person living with Alzheimer's or another dementia can be particularly expensive. Let's take a moment again to check your knowledge about Alzheimer's. What do you think? Do you think Alzheimer's is a normal part of the aging process? True or false? The answer is actually false. Alzheimer's is a progressive and fatal brain disease. Symptoms usually develop slowly and get worse over time, becoming severe enough to affect daily tasks. While the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's is increasing age, the disease is not, and I want to emphasize not, a part of normal aging. Most individuals with the disease are 65 years or older. After age 65, the risk of developing Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. After age 85, the risk is about 1 in 3. Let's try another question. Alzheimer's only affects the person's memory. How many of you think this is true? How many think that it is false? Hopefully you selected false because the answer is also false. Alzheimer's impacts a person's memory, thinking, and behavior. It also impacts their ability to manage money. In fact, studies show that trouble managing bills and other financial problems can sometimes be an early sign of dementia. This is another important reason it's important to understand how the disease can impact finances. This was one of the early signs that I noticed with my mom. She was our accountant bookkeeper for the family, and she paid all the bills. And every month when the check statement came, she balanced the checkbook to the penny. That was when I started noticing that she was having difficulty because there was a lot of scribbling in the checkbook register, and there was a lot of time that she could not balance the checkbook anymore. And she started writing some questionable checks, payments, and so forth. So that was a key trigger for me that something is not quite right. Alzheimer's disease usually progresses slowly through 3 stages: early, middle, and late. In a medical setting, you'll sometimes hear these referred to as mild, moderate, and severe. So early onset or mild cognitive impairment would mean the same thing, depending upon what the setting is. The symptoms of Alzheimer's worsen over time, although the rate at which the disease progresses does vary. On average, a person with Alzheimer's lives 4 to 8 years after diagnosis, but some people live 20 years or more, depending upon other factors. As the person advances through the disease and their care needs increase, so does the cost of providing care. In the beginning, people living with Alzheimer's may start to have trouble managing their money or remembering to pay bills. As the disease gets worse, they will no longer be able to communicate their wishes to family and friends or make important decisions about financial or legal issues. Many people avoid financial planning because thinking about it causes anxiety and fear, but preparing for future costs can actually help lower that stress. Early planning is especially important for a person living with Alzheimer's or another dementia because it allows them to participate in the decisions about finances and future care. The financial impact of Alzheimer's disease on caregivers is twofold. As we discussed earlier, many caregivers experience financial problems because they have to reduce their hours or take time off work. And as the disease progresses, caregivers will need to pay for services or support for the person living with Alzheimer's. Let's learn more about this from someone firsthand.
So when we finally moved into assisted living, when we first got the cost, it was going to be $5,000 a month. When we started adding on daily medications and housekeeping and all the other things that come with it, we were quickly at $6,000 per month. In my mind, every month I was, doing the calculations of, all right, how much money does Dad have left? How long can this last? What happens when that goes away?
You can hear the anxiety in her voice. Caregiving for a person with Alzheimer's or another dementia poses other unique challenges as well. Dementia caregivers spend more than $11,000 a year on out-of-pocket caregiving costs, nearly twice as much as non-dementia caregivers. These challenges, along with the stresses of caregiving, can lead to increased depression or anxiety. 30 to 40% of caregivers for people living with dementia experience depression, while 44% have anxiety. Because about 2/3 of dementia caregivers are women, they are more likely to experience the stress of caregiving. Let's learn about some other caregivers who face unique challenges. We'll start with another knowledge check here. Do you think people younger than 65 can develop Alzheimer's? How many of you think this is true? How many of you think this is false? Well, the answer is actually true. While older age is the greatest risk factor for Alzheimer's, and most individuals living with dementia are older adults, people younger than 65 can also develop Alzheimer's. This form of the disease is known as younger onset Alzheimer's, sometimes called early onset. People living with younger onset Alzheimer's and their caregivers face additional financial challenges. Many of these individuals report losing or quitting one or more jobs prior to their diagnosis because their cognitive changes affected them at work. As a result, these individuals are not able to maximize benefits from their employers, such as disability insurance, Family and Medical Leave Act protections, or continued healthcare coverage through COBRA. People living with younger onset Alzheimer's and their care partners ultimately have less time to plan for the future, including savings for retirement. These care partners face unique challenges because of their age and stage in life. Care partners may have to return to work, increase their hours, or get another job to make up for the loss of income while still caring for the family responsibilities. This is especially true if the person living with the disease worked a job that provided most of the financial support for their family. Many of these care partners still have children at home and face increasing costs associated with raising a family. Because of the financial strain of the disease, they may no longer be able to start or continue saving for their children's education and other expenses like family vacations or hobbies. Due to their age, these care partners may still have financial obligations such as a mortgage, car payment, loans, or other debt that older caregivers no longer have. Many resources for assistance and support require that an individual is 65 years or older in order to qualify. There is a 2-year waiting period between when a person is placed on Social Security disability insurance and when they are eligible for Medicare. In the meantime, the person living with younger onset Alzheimer's has to secure other health insurance coverage. This can impact the entire family if the individual was the primary insurance carrier. Another group to consider is the LGBTQ community. Members are more likely to be single. They often live alone and are less likely to have children. This might mean these individuals have a small support network, which can present difficulties as Alzheimer's progresses. Since that person living with the disease will eventually need someone else to take over paying bills and making other financial decisions. It's important for members of the LGBTQ community to have financial plans in place because it helps make sure that any caregivers who are not relatives can access the person's money if and when the person needs help managing it. People from lower income households are also less likely to be financially prepared for the costs of caregiving. They may be unemployed or have part-time or low-paying jobs that are less likely to offer retirement benefits or allow them to save for the future. They may struggle to make ends meet and have limited financial resources to pay monthly bills or cover medical expenses and care costs. This financial strain can mean relying on credit cards or taking out loans, causing increased debt and poverty. This results in added stress, but less ability to pay for resources that can provide relief, like respite care. Families with limited income may qualify for care and support services that are offered at little to no cost or at a reduced rate. Now let's talk about what you can do to avoid or reduce the financial strains of caregiving. But first, let's do another knowledge check. So who do you think can benefit from putting financial plans in place for the future? People with a lot of money, people retiring soon, caregivers, low-income households, everyone. You guessed it. The answer is everyone. Many people assume that financial planning is only helpful for people who make a lot of money, but everyone can benefit from putting financial plans in place, especially those who are living with or caring for someone with the disease or chronic illness. Financial planning can help ensure care costs will be covered and prevent financial hardship in the future. There are benefits to putting financial plans in place as soon as possible for both the person receiving the care and for the caregiver. Benefits for the caregiver include knowing the person's wishes, feeling more confident making important decisions when the person you're caring for can no longer make them, knowing how to handle financial issues and pay for care, and less chance of making costly or unwise decisions, such as taking money from life insurance, stopping insurance premium payments, or cashing in a 401k or other retirement account too early. Let's hear more on this topic from a caregiver as well as a dementia care expert. Let's hear from the caregiver first.
My mother, by putting plans in place early, that really helped me because it gives me a sense of confidence that I'm doing the things that she really wants to be done. It allows me to not have to worry about decisions that I make because my mother has already laid out the plan. She's stated her wishes, and my role is really to execute those plans. I have found that making decisions for my own situation can often be difficult. And so it's even harder to make decisions, especially when it comes to medical decisions, financial decisions, to have that responsibility of making those decisions for someone else can be very, very difficult. So in that my mother was so prepared and had laid out financial plans and really had a structure around her life that has really allowed me to be less anxious as I perform the caregiving role.
All right, let's hear from the expert.
One of the benefits of putting financial plans in place for caregivers is simply peace of mind. Oftentimes we have a lot of anxiety and fear about the unknown. How long is the disease going to last? What are the care needs going to be? When we think of all of those things that we might be apprehensive about, and we put plans in place for if this happens, here's how we'll handle it. And we really think through, here's what's typical with the disease, here's what I need to be thinking about, and here's my plan for that. It can be such a gift to the whole family because people can settle in and focus on, here's what I need to focus on today, here's what I need to think about right now, without the weight of the what ifs hanging over their head.
Okay, so as both of the individuals just told us, the benefits from early planning for the individual include the ability to share exactly what they want to happen and to help make decisions about their finances and future care. It provides a sense of reassurance because others know their wishes and will follow them. And it also provides a feeling of relief that comes from having legal and financial plans in place. Let's hear from the expert one more time.
One benefit of planning early for the person with the disease is that they get to have their say. They get to say, here is how I want things to play out. If there's ever a time when I can't live alone or when I need this kind of care, here's how I'd like that to happen. Here's who I want to be making decisions on my behalf if I can't make them for myself. So they get to have their say. In addition, they get to make choices about how they live their life, what they do now and in the months and years to come, with this additional knowledge of, hey, I've got this disease and here's what I can expect. And so a lot of people tell us that they choose differently, and they choose differently from each other. I talked to one person with Alzheimer's who said, you know what, I want every day to be regular. I want to work in my flower beds. I want to play with my grandkids. I want to have lunch with a friend. I just want lots of great regular days. I've talked to other folks with dementia diseases who said, I want to do the things I've been looking forward to. I want to take some big trips, or I want to do some really special things with the people I'm close to. So it's not the same for everybody, but the person with the disease gets to make choices and gets to live life more on their terms.
Now that you know more about financial planning or why financial planning is important, you're ready to learn more about how to start that financial planning process. In order to get started, you'll need to have a conversation about money with the person for whom you provide care. Know that even people who are comfortable managing their own money may find it difficult to discuss someone else's finances. Talking about money can make people feel anxious and uncomfortable. It may be hard to know how to start the conversation, but there are some things you can do to make them more positive and productive. To help you feel more confident when starting a discussion about finances, it can be helpful to write down your goals and what financial documents you will want to review or discuss. Identify which family members or close friends should be a part of the financial planning conversation. This should be individuals that the person living with the disease trusts or who know about the person's medical and financial situation. Have the discussion at a calm time of day and in a quiet place. This can lower stress or anxiety for everyone involved. Encourage the person to be honest about their assets and expenses, as well as what's important for them. Don't rush. Planning takes time. Focus on the easy wins first and build from successes. Consider these additional tips for having a discussion about someone else's finances. Be patient and understanding. It can be hard to ask for and accept help managing finances, especially for someone living with dementia. Ask about the person's wishes for their finances and future care. Explain that planning early is important so that you can honor those wishes. Don't judge the person and their decisions. Everyone handles money in their own way. The goal is to come to an agreement on how the person's money will be managed when they are no longer able to do so. If the person has difficulty communicating, it may be helpful to use short sentences and simple terms. Pause at times to make sure the person understands what is being said, and repeat what you've heard them say and ask if you are understanding them correctly. If the conversation becomes stressful, take a break and try talking again later. It's okay for financial planning to be a process that happens over time. Try to end on a positive note. These conversations can be difficult for everyone. Check in regularly. Person's financial situation can change as care needs change. Plan to discuss finances once a year or when there's a major change in the person's situation or health. Let's hear from our caregiver again on what worked well for her when having financial conversations with her mom.
Advice I'd have for other caregivers if the conversation about finances doesn't go well at first is to keep trying. It took a while for my mom to come around, and I was exasperated. I would try to catch her at a good moment, and sometimes she'd give me a little tidbit here or there, so it might take time to just pull it all together. It's sort of trying to understand the moment if you're having a good time. What I did also was to bring up friends. My mother was very empathetic, so if I'd say, oh, remember so-and-so? They had a situation with their mom or dad or family member where something happened and the person didn't know what to do, or they didn't have understanding about it. So that was really hard on them. She'd say, oh, really? And I'd say, yeah, see, that would help me if, we talked about that kind of thing. And that would usually get her. So in my case, that empathy is what I would kind of try to use for her to open up more, but continuing to do it, catching on a good day. That was key because it took time and it was piecemeal. Small victories, just get as much as you can over time and keep at it, because there usually will be a window where you can kind of break through, or in some cases it might be someone else has to talk to them.
When starting the conversation, it can help to begin with a positive statement. This builds confidence and connection with the person you're caring for. For example, you could say, I've always admired the way you handle your finances. I want to learn more about what works well for you. I've noticed you seem worried about finances these days. What worries you most? What can I do to help? I respect your privacy, but it would give me peace of mind to know if you have financial plans in place so that I can follow your wishes. If you're starting a conversation about your own financial wishes for the future, you could say, I want to talk with you about my finances so you can access them in case of emergency. Or I really want you to understand my wishes for the future. Let's talk about how I want my finances managed. In your handout, in your workbook, there is a worksheet that looks like this. It's on pages 1 and 2 of your workbook. And this worksheet will walk you through the steps that I've just described, including putting your goals for the conversation, the financial documents that you'll want to review or discuss, the people who should be involved in the conversation, and the best time and place to talk. We won't take the time to fill those out today, but I encourage you to complete them later. Next, we're going to talk about another issue that can have a major impact on finances for older adults, especially those living with dementia. Let's start this module by seeing what you know about financial abuse, fraud, and scams on older Americans. On average, when a person age 80 or older becomes a victim of financial abuse, fraud, or scams, how much money do you think they lose? $5,200, $10,500, $15,700, or $39,200. Unfortunately, each year the answer is 39,200, which can sound like a staggering amount. Studies show that financial exploitation is the most common form of elder abuse, and yet only a small fraction of these incidents are reported. And you might say, why is only a small fraction reported? Well, it can be embarrassing. Folks can dispute the fact that they're certain that the person was above board. There's a myriad of reasons why it doesn't get reported. Financial crimes against older Americans are a growing problem, as you hear on the news pretty much every day. This abuse can occur anywhere, including at home and in care settings. Most states have laws that make elder financial abuse a crime. People living with dementia are at especially high risk of becoming a victim of fraud and financial abuse because they may not remember or, again, report the abuse or understand that someone is really taking advantage of them. As memory and other thinking skills decline, they may struggle to make good financial decisions, making them more vulnerable to scams and fraud. Let's hear from an expert on this topic.
People living with dementia are more susceptible perhaps to fraud and financial abuse than other people because they have a disease that's attacking their brain. And so their ability to solve problems, to think about things logically, to have insight may be impaired, and they may be able to be tricked by people they trust or people who seem nice or seem trustworthy in a way that they wouldn't have been at an earlier time.
Signs that may indicate a person is having problems with money or potentially being taken advantage of include piles of unopened bills or just mail in general, electricity, gas, or other utilities getting shut off because the bills were not paid, unusual or large purchases, buying the same thing when more than once, or buying things they really don't even need, like dog food when they don't have a pet. Giving money to every telemarketer who calls or sending money in the mail to every company who asks. They might give money to the same person or the same company multiple times. Missing money or unexplained withdrawals from the person's bank account. As a caregiver, there are simple things that you can do to reduce the person's risk of financial abuse and fraud. You should include the person you are caring for in this process as much as possible so they can help decide which safety measures will be put in place. Some things to consider are agreeing to a charge or spending limit on credit cards, creating a separate account where you can keep a small amount, agreed upon amount of money so that the person can use that for recreational activities, meals with friends, etc. Set up auto pay for bills instead of paying them by check. You can do this through your bank or through the company sending the bills. Sign up to receive automatic notifications for withdrawals from the bank accounts or large charges to credit cards. If you set a charge or spending limit, and if the person spends more than that, the bank or the credit card company will let you know. Request electronic bank and credit card statements and watch for unusual purchases or changes in how the person typically spends money. Sign up for a do not call list, such as donotcall.gov. I'm not sure exactly how well that one works, but you can try. Ask credit card companies to stop sending balance transfer checks and opt out of future solicitations. One of the things that I frequently, when I get what I think is a telemarketing or a scam call, one of the things that they encourage you to not do is when you answer the phone and they say, "Is this Debbie?" Not to say the word yes, because they may be recording your voice and that may obligate you inappropriately for some type of charge down the road. What I will do is when they ask that, "Is this Debbie?" I will respond with, "Who is calling, please?" I don't say the word yes. So I'm very specific on that one. There is, well, let's hear from a caregiver first before we go to the workbook.
So one of the things that I did, my father was very proud. He really didn't want to admit that he had Alzheimer's. So I wanted him to be able to continue to feel good about himself. So I actually set up a checking savings account for him that was joint with me. Because again, I had power of attorney, so I could move things around a bit. I made sure that he always had $200 in that account. Everything else was protected, and he really didn't have access to it anymore. But he didn't know that because he still had that $200. A couple of years into his diagnosis, he actually had somebody stop at his home. He was outside working in his yard. They came by, a couple, old car, pulled up to the driveway. They had a child with them and said their child was ill. And they said they needed money for health care for this child. My father was always very generous as he became older and as he became more impaired with Alzheimer's. He became more generous. And so his inclination was to help this couple. They took him to the credit union. They asked him to withdraw all of his funds, so he did. He had access to that $200 that he knew about, and he gave it to them. They left him there in the parking lot, and he walked home. So it was really awful that that happened to him, but his money was protected because of the safeguards that we had put up. Everything else was still there, and I was able to replace that $200. So we tried very hard to do everything we could to protect him financially, but also to make sure that we didn't take away his sense of self-esteem.
Okay, so in your workbook, on pages 3 and 4, there is information that summarizes the tips that we've just been talking about, and it lists the steps that you can take if you're if you suspect financial abuse or fraud. You can refer to it again later as you begin to complete the steps. So many caregivers avoid or delay making financial and legal plans. It can be stressful to think about the future, especially when you're caring for someone with a chronic illness. Jobs, family responsibilities, and other duties can make it hard to find the time to organize financial and legal matters for yourself or for someone else. But as we've discussed, it's important to put plans in place as early as possible, and you can make the process easier by breaking things into simple steps, doing one task at a time. Let's look at some of these steps, which many of you can complete without a financial advisor or an attorney. But I kind of strongly encourage you to seek out the professionals. It takes the load and anxiety off of you trying to do all of the work and adds it to their side of the equation. So write down cash ins and outs, see if there's places to cut back and build up savings for unexpected care. Let's hear from a couple of caregivers as to how they handled this.
One thing that I would suggest is when you have those monthly bills is to call. I had cable and I said, hey, I can't pay this amount when I'm looking at all of the bills that we had. And they didn't want to lose me as a customer, so they reduced the cost of the cable. Also, the medical bills, even though you get a demand for payment for a certain amount of money, call them, go on the payment plan, talk to the hospital about a payment plan, talk to the different utilities. I was on a budget for heat. I was on a budget for electricity. Reach out and ask. And don't do all those calls at one day. Break it up and do one at a time so you don't get overwhelmed with it.
And let's hear from a second caregiver.
Keeping within a budget, the budget is really, really important for food, because it's very tempting to go into a grocery store and find all kinds of delicacies. So that's been a big change and a good one. We found that for the two of us, we were spending a lot of money on groceries. So taking a look at that is really helped.
And as we know today, the price of groceries has greatly increased. So let's take inventory of assets and debts. Assets are anything owned that has value, like your car, house, bank account, or stocks. Debt is any money that is borrowed and has to be paid back over time, like credit cards and loans. Another important step in making financial action plan is to identify the cost of care, both now and in the future. Keep in mind that medical or other kinds of insurance may pay for some costs, but may not cover all of them. Care costs could include things like ongoing medical treatment, prescription drugs, personal care supplies, adult day services, in-home care services. And it is important to note that if you hire professional in-home caregiver on your own, you may have to pay his or her Social Security and unemployment taxes. Full-time residential care services. Those are all things to keep in mind. And finally, since Alzheimer's is a progressive disease, caregivers will also eventually need to assume many ongoing financial responsibilities, including paying the bills, arranging for benefit claims, making investment decisions, and preparing tax returns. So if you go back to the workbook, you'll see that there are several pages on covering care costs, including creating a monthly budget, knowing where the income comes from, where your expenses are going, your ins and outs. There's also expenses to consider when creating that monthly budget. And on the next couple of pages in the workbook, there's also information with regards to reducing monthly expenses. It may be helpful to look into financial resources that can cover the cost of care. Some common funding sources include personal resources like income, 401k or other retirement accounts, savings, stocks, bonds, and personal property. Federal funding such as Medicare Parts A, B, and D. Veterans benefits, that's a real key one. And again, I go back to using professionals to help you kind of navigate through this process. When I first met with my elder care attorney with regards to my mom and helping us through applying for Medicaid, the attorney mentioned to me veterans benefits. And I thought, wait a minute, mom's not a veteran, but my father was a veteran. And so that made her eligible for a certain amount of veterans benefits. Who knew? I had no clue. So that's why I encourage you to maybe seek the guidance of a professional rather than trying to navigate this all on your own. State funding resources, as I mentioned, such as Medigap and Medicaid. You can find additional resources at benefitscheckup.org. Some of these programs may be able to help pay for medication costs, transportation, meals, and more. And again, in your handouts for the program, you'll find a brochure called Money Matters. Actually, I'm not sure if that's actually included in your handouts, but I will say that if you go to alz.org, There's access to the brochure, and the brochure is called Money Matters. I'm showing it on my screen, on my little screen. And there's also another pamphlet that I would encourage you to take a look at that's called Take Care of Yourself. So this is all about for caregivers. You can also call the Alzheimer's Association, as you see at the bottom of the screen, 24/7, 365. The helpline is available. It was a godsend to me when I was helping or trying to navigate for my mother's issues. So 1-800-272-3900. It's free, and you can talk with an expert who can help answer questions about these resources that you see on the screen, or connect you with other low-cost or free community support services. Legal planning makes sure that you or a trusted family member or friend can make decisions for the person living with Alzheimer's or any disease for that matter when they can no longer make those decisions themselves. Like we've discussed with making financial plans, it's important to make legal plans as early as you can so that everyone is well prepared. Putting legal plans in place doesn't have to be stressful or difficult. And by all means, it does help relieve the stress later on in the process or in the progression. Getting legal advice and services from an attorney who specializes in elder law is helpful. However, you can complete some of those legal documents on your own. Let's hear from the caregiver again about how she did that.
Most of these resources you can access online. You can access from multiple different entities. And I did most of all of her documents that were necessary: the power of attorney, the living will, the healthcare power of attorney, the financial power of attorney. All of those things you can access, and you can get them notarized and legal documents created. So don't let that be a hindrance to take care of those items, because those items are really, really important early on in the disease. If you wait, it's only going to cause more problems. So the earlier you get it, the better. And don't be afraid of the nuances of all these documents and all these papers. It's pretty simplified if you research it. There's a really simple way to go about it and take care of it as soon as possible.
Again, as I said, kudos to her for doing that on her own. However, it was a burden off of my shoulders that I used my legal counsel as my guide throughout the process. It really took a load off my shoulders and was much less stress than if I had tried to navigate the process on my own. When organizing legal plans, it's important to start by taking inventory of any legal documents that are already in place, review them, and make updates if you need to. At the very least, make sure the following documents, sometimes referred to as advanced directives, are in place and up to date. So those include a durable power of attorney for both finances and healthcare. These allow a person to name someone else to make financial and health-related decisions when they can no longer do so for themselves. A living will. This document explains a person's wishes for medical treatment near the end of life. And I would encourage you on the durable power of attorney, there is typically a primary and then a secondary person. So if you become, as the caregiver, as the primary, incapacitated or are unable to do something because you're out of town or not available, then the secondary person can take over. So that's something that's typically established when you do those documents. So again, if you refer to your workbook, there are 2 pages in your workbook that talk about organizing the legal plans and reviewing and updating documents. So again, that's something that you can take a look at a later time, but know that that information is included in your handbook. There are a myriad of professionals near you. So this lists some resources that you can reach out to. I would note the first one under legal, the Alzheimer's Association, in conjunction with AARP, have developed a resource called Community Resource Finder. And you can access that at alz.org/CRF for Community Resource Finder. All you do when you get to this point in the website is to you enter in your zip code, and then it gives you, in addition to legal resources, it will give you financial resources, it will give you healthcare resources within a certain radius. I believe it's a 20-mile radius of that zip code. Doctors, nursing homes, organizations such as in the Fort Wayne community where I live, we have an agency called Aging and In-Home Services. And so they can help you with a lot of resources, transportation, individual care items, while you're still maintaining an at-home situation for the person. They can also help you with finding nursing homes, adult day services, and so forth. So additionally, under the legal is Elder Care Locator, which is another resource. National Elder Law Foundation, Legal Services Corporation, American Association of Elder Law Attorneys. By the way, you don't have to be writing all of this down. This will all be included in the recording. And you can find this material out as well in if you go to alz.org again /CRF. Financial resources, the Association of Financial Professionals, the Association of International Certified Professional Accountants, CPAs, Consumer Credit Counseling Services in the various communities, and finally, the U.S. Bankruptcy Court Trustee's Office. So there are a lot of resources out there available to you. And it can become a little bit of a maze to navigate some of them. So that's why I really encourage you to go back to alz.org or to call our 1-800 number and have a caregiver or a care professional help you navigate through this, what may seem like a maze of assistance. Finally, our last module is going to talk about creating a backup plan. It's critically important that you create a backup plan in case something happens to you and you are no longer able to provide the care. So a backup plan can be accomplished by talking with friends and family members about who could take over difficult or different caregiving responsibilities if you become unable to do so. This includes managing your money and the money of the person living with the disease. Consider assigning responsibilities to more than one person. If there are no other family members who are willing or able to help with these responsibilities, work on creating a plan with the person you are caring for and possibly an attorney. If you are the agent for the person's power of attorney, meaning that you are the one who will make legal, financial, and medical decisions on their behalf, it's a good idea to designate a trusted backup agent in case something happens to you Talk with the person you're caring for to determine who should carry out these responsibilities. And that's what I was mentioning before when you're setting up a will situation or an advance directive, is there's usually a primary and then a secondary person established in those documents. Keep an up-to-date list of the person's medical information. This should include medications and the name of contact information of the doctors and anyone else involved in the person's care. I would also encourage you to keep an up-to-date list of financial locations, their credit cards, their investments, their bank accounts, anything that their insurance person, if they have a home and they still have insurance that they carry on the home, who is that person? But also who's their medical insurance through. So it's important to keep all of those pieces of information and to keep them handy in one place so that in the case that you're needing them, you're not searching all over a house or wherever. And finally, make sure that you're taking care of your own health and well-being. The best thing you can do for the person that you're caring for is to stay physically and emotionally strong. Visit the doctor regularly, eat well, and stay physically active. Look into respite care or other support services like a caregiver support group through the Alzheimer's Association. I mentioned it was a lifesaver for me. Ask for and accept help from others, and that's sometimes really difficult to do, but it's important to do. It can be especially helpful to build a care team of family and friends who can assist with caregiving responsibilities. The Alzheimer's Association has free tools, and here again, go back to alz.org, including an online care team calendar that can organize friends and family who want to help. The Alzheimer's Association is available whenever and wherever you need reliable information and support. Call our toll-free 24/7 helpline at 800-272-3900 anytime to speak with trained and knowledgeable staff who can help with education, decision-making, support, crisis assistance, and resource identification. Help is available in more than 200 languages. Visit our website, alz.org. It's often the first stop for individuals following a diagnosis or other dementia. And it does include sections specifically for people living with the disease and their caregivers. Use the Alzheimer's Association and AARP's Community Resource Finder at alz.org/CRF. As I shared earlier, this website can help you locate legal professionals in your area, and it can also help you find long-term care and community-based services, local association offices, and their offering of programs and support services. So before we close today's presentation, I'd like you to think about everything that we covered. And if you turn to the last, I don't know, I'm sorry, this is not included in your activities packet. But an example would be, I hope you kind of pledge to yourself that I will complete the worksheets from today's presentation. Write down one or two action steps you plan to take after today's program. And again, I want to thank you for your time today and your enthusiasm about learning more about Alzheimer's and today, especially about managing financial resources. I'm going to turn this back over to Amanda to see if we have any questions in the chat or any questions from those that are in person.
Thank you so much, Debbie. We do have a couple of questions in chat. I'm going to clarify one of them, but in the meantime, I can ask the first one. So folks like yourself, the community educators who are volunteers with the Alzheimer's Association, obviously very valuable resources, and we really appreciate your taking the time and others like you taking the time to share this information with the community. I was wondering if you had some information about community educators and, what, if anyone, else would like to consider becoming one, what are the requirements, or maybe even just some information about your background that maybe helps make for a good community educator.
Well, that's a great question. And it's very easy. If you go to alz.org, there is a tab at the top of the homepage where it asks about volunteering. And we cannot survive without our volunteers. Our volunteers put in so many hours of work to keep the Alzheimer's Association afloat. There is obviously individuals that are paid to be on staff. However, the majority of the people doing the boots on the ground work are volunteers. And, my educational background, my degree is in elementary education. But I'm technically a retiree from a bank. So I worked 28 years in the banking industry in a variety of capacities. I started as a teller and I ended my career as the human resources manager for the Indiana, Ohio region. And throughout part of that career in banking, I facilitated classes. We didn't have Zoom back in those days because I officially took early retirement in 2010. So we didn't have Zoom at that point. But Zoom has allowed us to communicate with more people at the same time rather than having to be face to face with people. We can get the message out to a broader audience via Zoom. So if the pandemic did anything for us, it allowed us the opportunity to find out a new way to communicate. So you don't have to be a professional. You don't have to know everything there is to know about Alzheimer's. You just have to have the passion. And if you have a connection like I do from a familial situation, that is powerful. But it doesn't mean that you can't participate as my lean to the left here, as my background is talking about the longest day. Next Thursday, or this Thursday, I'm sorry, June the 20th is the longest day. It's the day of the summer solstice. It's the day that we have the most sunshine in the United States. And so we celebrate the longest day because sunshine, time of day does have an impact on dementia patients. And so we celebrate the longest day by using it as one of our largest fundraisers throughout the country, with people having a variety of fundraising activities, from having a food truck come to your neighborhood, and a portion of the proceeds go towards Alzheimer's funding and research. To our biggest fundraiser, which happens in October, which is our walk, the Walk to End Alzheimer's. And there are walks that happen throughout communities in Indiana, throughout the United States. And again, it is our biggest fundraiser, and a huge majority of the money that is collected throughout the year goes towards funding research or advocates that go to legislators and say, we need your help. We need the funding that will help to fund the research, to find the treatments that we have recently, over the last year, been able to fund. And just recently, Eli Lilly, the FDA approved an Eli Lilly drug that will help with early onset dementia. So that makes 2 drugs on the marketplace today. But we need more money, as any funding does. And that's what our volunteers do. Our volunteers are our boots on the ground. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. We do have a couple more. So Are there services available through the Alzheimer's Association to those that have been diagnosed with dementia, but not necessarily Alzheimer's?
That's a great question. Dementia is the overarching umbrella term for anyone who has a cognitive impairment. Alzheimer's represents 80% of those individuals, approximately 80% of those individuals, and is the most common form of dementia that is um, diagnosed. Alzheimer's has to do with plaques and what are called plaques and tangles, the beta amyloid tangles that develop in the brain and basically cause the brain to shrink as well as to form holes in the brain. And so Alzheimer's is the most prevalent. The next one on the list is vascular dementia, which affects, as you can imagine, vascular, it affects your brains, it affects your veins, veins, arteries, and ultimately the heart. So it can cause heart problems, it can cause blood flow issues, and so forth. And then the list goes down from there, frontotemporal dementia. There's over, I believe, 200 different types of dementia. People can have mixed dementia, they can have more than one. But as I said, Alzheimer's is the most prevalent form of dementia. And unfortunately, in the situation with Alzheimer's, the person progressively loses their long-term or their short-term memory. So that's why they repeat questions. They may lose balance. They eventually lose the short-term memory and recognition of potentially you as a caregiver, as a family member, and eventually they lose the memory of themselves. They can look in the mirror and not know who they are. And that's the unfortunate part of Alzheimer's. Any other questions, Amanda?
Yes, thank you. We do have a question. They also want to know about other kinds of chronic diseases or terminal illnesses. I think they list, for example, COPD, things that are going to eventually diminish brain function and maybe
Yes.
even contribute to dementia as a result, but maybe that person's not actually diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia yet. I think the question is, would the services then provided by Alzheimer's Association still be helpful to those folks?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Yes, breathing issues, COPD, sleep apnea can contribute to developing a form of dementia or potentially Alzheimer's. It's important that, and since this is Healthy Brain Awareness Month, it's important that we get good sleep, regular exercise. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. So those types of things, eating well, eating a balanced diet, making sure or being aware of blood pressure, diabetes, those types of things, being careful that if you do have a balance issue, you tend to have falls, that you protect your head. And that might look really silly if you're a walker and you're wearing a helmet, like a bicycle type helmet. But for heaven's sakes, don't worry about being silly, worry about protecting your head. So if you do have some balance issues, maybe using a cane or some type of an aid to help you. But if nothing else, you're taking a walk around your house inside when it's this toasty outside, especially. But those are all things that you can do. And you can find more tips again on alz.org with regards to healthy brain habits. The brain controls our body. And if we don't do healthy brain things, then our body suffers. So it's important to take care of your brain, and breathing. That's the first thing we do when we're born, and it's the last thing we do when we die. So breathing is critical. Breathing is important.
Great, thank you, Debbie. Do you have any suggestions for helping someone who has elderly parents with their finances when they live in another state?
That's always a challenge. And fortunately, I did not have that situation. My parents actually lived with me. And so we were under the same roof. So I would suggest if there's a close friend, maybe another sibling that lives in that same state, or maybe a sibling of your parents that's still living, that's in that same state. It is really difficult in that situation. And again, I would suggest maybe calling the 1-800 number and talking with a care professional about maybe there are some suggestions. But it's really difficult because you're not there to maybe go to doctor's appointments. I would encourage you, as your parents age, and if they are close by to you, that you start going to their doctor's appointments with them, rather than hearing what they want to tell you after they get home from the doctor. It's important that you hear it, and it's important that the doctor hears if you have any concerns. I was blessed with my mother's doctor having a wonderful bedside manner, and talking with her, and then he would tell her, "Now I'm going to talk with your daughter." And he would physically turn on his little stool and he would ask me what concerns I had. So that was a real blessing for me. But maybe contact the 1-800 number to see if there aren't any other suggestions that are available. But that is a difficult one, especially if you don't have maybe a brother or sister that's there, cousin, um, friends. Reach out and expand that caregiver network is maybe my best suggestion.
All right, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. So once again, I will say thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing your time and your expertise with us.
Thank you. Take care.